Hi there, Lifelong Wellness students. This short video is just going to cover Unit 2 in your textbook, which deals with chronic diseases. And the 4 chronic diseases that your textbook is going to discuss is coronary artery disease, diabetes, type 1 versus type 2, osteoporosis, and cancer. So I'm just going to go through just a few things that I want you to understand and supplement that chapter with. So the first just deals with cardiovascular disease, understanding that that is the leading killer today, and taking a look at things that put us at risk for the development of that atherosclerosis. So what I'd like you to do is just take a look at this video here that just shows you the development of atherosclerosis. So what happens is we have this plaque develop on the walls of our arteries. And not only does it occur in the heart, but it can occur in the brain, it can occur in the extremities as well. So here's just a short video to walk you through that.
Narrowing of the arteries. Arteries are blood vessels that carry blood from the heart to all parts of the body. Over time, small tears in artery walls develop, and particles called low-density lipoproteins, LDLs, can get lodged in these tears. Lipoproteins are like package carriers. They transport fats, mainly cholesterol and triglycerides, from place to place throughout the bloodstream. As these LDLs get stuck in the wall, the body responds by sending in white blood cells to take care of the situation. But this doesn't work. The white blood cells eat up the LDLs and end up dying off. As this process happens again and again, a plaque-like substance develops and gets bigger and bigger. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time for this plaque to get really large. So eventually what happens is blood flow is restricted and can even be stopped. And over time this can lead to stroke or heart attack. The main risk factors for developing atherosclerosis include smoking, high cholesterol levels, high blood pressure, abdominal obesity, stress, poor nutrition, including overconsumption of foods high in saturated fats or added sugars, and not consuming enough fruits and veggies, overconsumption of alcohol, and lack of regular exercise. By making lifestyle changes to lower the risk factors just mentioned, it is possible to slow or stop the development of atherosclerosis.
So also, if you look on page 16 in your textbook, you'll see we have a table there that lists the positive risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and each one has a defining criteria. So for example, if you look at the first one that says family history, the defining criteria for that is if you have a heart attack or a sudden death before the age of 55 in a first-degree relative, like a father, brother, uncle, or over the age of 65 if it's a mother, sister, or aunt. So for example, somebody might say, my father suffered a heart attack at the age of 72. That wouldn't necessarily be within that defining criteria. So for males, it has to be before the age of 55, and for females before the age of 65 to be considered that family history. Then age is another positive risk factor, so that means it's going to increase the likelihood that we develop the disease. So for men over 45, women over 55 have an increased risk as well. Smoking, that's your third positive risk factor. Either currently smoking or having quit within the last 6 months, you would still count that as a positive risk factor. Hypertension, blood pressure, is another one that we should be checking regularly and know what our numbers are. And if you look here, these are the updated guidelines developed by the American Heart Association as far as blood pressure goes. And note that you'll see normal blood pressure is now defined as having a systolic blood pressure less than 120 and a diastolic less than 80. If you have a systolic blood pressure in the 120s, but yet your diastolic is still below 80, you're considered now as having elevated blood pressure. So for example, if they say, hey, your blood pressure is 126 over 78, that would fall within that elevated category. Hypertension stage 1 is now defined as 130 to 139 over 80 to 89, and then hypertension stage 2 is 140 or higher over 90 or higher. So with these new guidelines developed by the AHA, millions more Americans are being diagnosed with not only having elevated blood pressure, but also being in stage 1 hypertension. So being aware of that, get your blood pressure checked, find out what your numbers are. Hypercholesterolemia is another one that many people do not know what their numbers are. So I want to just share with you, as far as cholesterol goes, LDLs, like the video just talked about, LDLs are considered bad cholesterol. They just basically contribute to the plaque buildup that was just shown in the atherosclerosis video. So LDL numbers, we want to keep less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. Okay, and as your numbers go up from there, your risk of developing heart disease goes up as well. HDLs, high density lipoproteins, I call healthy. They're the good cholesterol numbers. We want to see at least above 60, preferably. And if you have less than 40, that's not good. So you want to have at least over 60 for HDLs. So HDLs help to actually transport that piece of fat from your bloodstream to your liver, and your liver will actually dispose of it and metabolize it and get rid of it as a waste product. So HDLs actually help to lower the amount of fats we have floating in our bloodstream. Triglycerides, on the other hand, normal numbers are less than 150. So again, as those numbers go up, your risk goes up as well. And then lastly, as far as total cholesterol, what should your numbers be? Total cholesterol should definitely be below 200 milligrams per deciliter. And if you look in your textbook, we do provide a table on the top of page 19 that talks about desirable levels for total cholesterol versus high. So cholesterol is another risk factor. Then if we go back, we can see impaired fasting glucose. So having a high blood glucose level, anything over 110, is going to be an increased risk. Sedentary lifestyle, so not engaging in at least 30 minutes of physical activity on most days of the week is considered sedentary. And then obesity, having a BMI of greater than 30 would be considered obese. You notice that that table does list one negative risk factor, and that's having a high HDL of over 60. So the negative risk factor means that it's going to decrease the likelihood of developing the disease. So the higher your HDLs are, the better it is for you. Okay, so just a little bit on cardiovascular disease. I want to move on now to diabetes, taking a look at the differences between type 1 versus type 2. So we need to develop an understanding of what that is. And diabetes in general is a disease characterized by high blood glucose levels. Okay, so it's the abnormal utilization of carbohydrate, which in turn leads to high levels of blood sugar. Okay, so this video is just going to walk you through type 1.
About 10% of people with diabetes have type 1. It's got nothing to do with diet or lifestyle, it just happens. When you have type 1 diabetes, your body attacks the insulin-producing cells in your pancreas, so you can't produce any insulin at all. And we all need insulin to live. It does an essential job. It allows the glucose in our blood to enter our cells and fuel our bodies. When you have type 1 diabetes, your body still breaks down the carbohydrate from food and drink and turns it into glucose. But when the glucose enters your bloodstream, there's no insulin to allow it into your body's cells. More and more glucose then builds up in your bloodstream. So what does this mean? Well, before diagnosis, your body tries to get rid of the glucose through your kidneys, and that makes you wee a lot. Weeing so much leads to another symptom of diabetes, extreme thirst. Because glucose can't enter your cells to give you energy, you'll feel incredibly tired. To try and get energy, the body breaks down fat stores to provide fuel. That's why people often lose weight before discovering they've got type 1 diabetes. These symptoms tend to come on quickly, over just a few days or weeks. Anyone who has these symptoms should see a doctor as soon as possible. If you've got type 1 diabetes, you get insulin into your body by injecting it or using a pump which delivers a constant supply into you. You'll also need to check that your blood glucose levels are not too low or too high by using a blood glucose testing device several times a day. When you start taking insulin, you'll begin to feel better and your blood glucose levels will go down. This is important because over a long period of time, high glucose levels in your blood can seriously damage your heart, your eyes, your feet, and your kidneys. These are known as the complications of diabetes. But with the right treatment and care, the long-term effects of diabetes and high glucose levels can be managed. You can find out how we can help you manage your diabetes on our website. We're still not sure why some people get type 1 diabetes and others don't, or why the immune system of someone with type 1 attacks the cells that produce insulin. But our researchers are learning more and more about type 1 diabetes so we can develop new treatments and one day find a cure.
So type 1 diabetes generally used to be called juvenile onset because most people are diagnosed at a younger age, although some people do get diagnosed at older ages as well, but we generally see younger population being diagnosed with it. So something happens where maybe it's a viral infection early on in life that could destroy the beta cells that produce insulin on the pancreas, and so therefore those individuals have to take insulin shots on a daily basis to regulate their blood sugar levels. So as far as diabetes go, about 10% of all cases are diagnosed as type 1. On the other hand, 90% of all cases are diagnosed as type 2.
About 90% of people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. If you've got type 2, the insulin your pancreas makes can't work properly, or your pancreas can't make enough insulin. And we all need insulin to live. It does an essential job. It allows the glucose in our blood to enter our cells and fuel our bodies. When you have type 2 diabetes, your body still breaks down carbohydrate from your food and drink and turns it into glucose. The pancreas responds to this by releasing insulin. But because this insulin can't work properly, blood glucose levels keep rising, so more insulin is released. For some people with type 2 diabetes, this can eventually tire the pancreas out, meaning their body makes less and less insulin. This causes even higher blood glucose levels. So what does this mean? Well, as your body can't get enough glucose into your cells, a common symptom of type 2 diabetes is feeling very tired. Other symptoms include needing to wee a lot, feeling extremely thirsty, cuts and grazes healing slowly, and getting infections like thrush. A lot of people don't get any symptoms or they don't notice them. Some people don't think the symptoms are important, so don't ask for help. This means that people can live with type 2 diabetes for up to 10 years before being diagnosed. And over a long period of time, high glucose levels in your blood can seriously damage your heart, your eyes, your feet, and your kidneys. These are known as the complications of diabetes. But with the right treatment and care, the effects of diabetes and high glucose levels can be managed. So if you've got any of these symptoms, see a doctor as soon as possible. There are different ways of treating type 2 diabetes. Some people can manage it by healthier eating, being more active and losing weight. Eventually, most people will need medication to bring their blood glucose down to a safe level. Whatever the treatment, everyone with type 2 diabetes needs to learn how to live with it.
So type 2 diabetes generally used to be called adult onset because many people didn't develop it until the age of 40 or beyond. But now, today, many adolescents are developing type 2 diabetes, so it's no longer an adult disease. The most frequently cited risk factor for type 2 diabetes is a sedentary lifestyle. And when we look at kids today, what do? Right? They sit on the computer, they're watching TV, they're sedentary. So more kids are developing adolescent type 2 diabetes as a result of that. So as far as what the numbers are, getting your blood sugars tested, a diagnosis of diabetes would be having a blood glucose level of 126 milligrams per deciliter. So that's fasting plasma glucose, FPG is what it's called. And if you have a level of 126 or higher, that would be diagnosed as having diabetes. Elevated or pre-diabetes would be a number anywhere from like 100 to 125 would be pre-diabetes. And then normal levels of fasting plasma glucose would be anywhere from 70 to 100 or 110. So when we get our cholesterol levels checked, we can also get our fasting glucose checked as well to see if we're at risk for diabetes. And risk factors for diabetes, if you look in your textbook, are pretty much the same as they were for cardiovascular disease. So again, just making note that we have control over a lot of that stuff. I want to move on to osteoporosis and real quick take a look at a video regarding that.
Is a bone disease that causes more than 8.9 million broken bones worldwide across men and women every year, resulting in an osteoporotic bone break every 3 seconds. Osteoporosis is a medical condition that weakens bones and makes them more likely to break. They can become so fragile that in serious cases, a strong sneeze or minor bumps can cause them to break. Wondering why you haven't heard more about osteoporosis? Well, one reason could be that it is known as a silent disease because you can't see or feel bone loss, so it goes unnoticed until the first bone break occurs. Both men and women are at risk of osteoporosis. Postmenopausal women are at a higher risk. After an initial fracture, these women are 5 times more likely to suffer another bone break within a year. The World Health Organization, WHO, has considered osteoporosis to be of increasing importance. Many women remain untreated within 6 months after an osteoporosis-related fracture. It's important to be aware of the risk factors associated with osteoporosis in order to understand if you could be affected. Here are a few to consider. Previous bone break as an adult. Advanced age. Low bone mineral density. Parental history of hip fracture. Low body weight. Smoking. You've likely heard that vitamin D, calcium, and weight-bearing exercise can help keep bones healthy. It's true, but for people with osteoporosis, it may not be enough to protect against a fracture. Osteoporosis and broken bones are not a normal part of aging. If you are a postmenopausal woman, you may be at risk for osteoporosis. It's important to talk to your doctor about a bone health plan.
So as far as osteoporosis goes, a lot of the risk factors again are pretty much the same, but the big difference is having a thin frame. So low body weight, very thin women especially tend to be at a higher risk of developing low bone mineral content or osteoporosis. And again, it is more prevalent in women than it is in men, but men do develop that disease as well. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on cancer. And if you look on page 24 in your textbook, you'll see the acronym CAUTION. These are all ways that you can look for signs and symptoms of cancer. So just being aware of that acronym CAUTION and paying attention to each letter and what it stands for is key in the recognition and maybe early detection of cancer.
Son, eat a healthy diet, and get moving, all ways to reduce the risk of cancer. Dr. Timothy Moynihan is an oncologist at Mayo Clinic. He says lifestyle choices can affect our risk of cancer.
It looks like somewhere between 45 and 50% of cancer deaths are due to factors that are potentially modifiable.
Lung cancer due to smoking tops the list.
We also know that use of alcohol, especially heavy use of alcohol, when you combine it with other things such as smoking, clearly increases the risk of things like head and neck cancer, esophageal cancer, other types of cancer, more so than does just smoking by itself.
Dr. Moynihan says being up to date on vaccinations is important too.
Cervical cancer, anal cancer, liver cancer are all associated with various forms of infection. And we know we can have a dramatic effect on several of these by getting your routine immunizations at the right time.
For the Mayo Clinic News Network.
So again, cancer, another one of those chronic diseases, looking at the risk factors for it on page 23, you will see again the ones we can control are pretty much the same as they were for many of our other chronic diseases, and as well as the ones that we cannot control. So pay attention to your risk factors, look at the lifestyle changes that we can make, try to make positive lifestyle changes, try to control all of those ones that we can modify as much as possible.